Hi, and welcome back again. This is another short video, and we're going to talk about font size, line spacing, and other spacing methods for text. Now, I'm using the same page that we created in a previous exercise, and you can see that I've got text here. I've got the H1 text, the title, the H2, and then here's some paragraph text. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that people are using rather large font sizes in their projects. And I think that this is in part because people want to fill up the space. It's maybe difficult to write enough text to fill up the page, and so by increasing the font size and increasing the line spacing, you're able to fill up the page more easily. The problem is that it doesn't look very good. We're trying to create web pages that will look good on the web. So this is really about the size that you want text. You don't want it to be much bigger. Now let me show you the things that I've seen people doing in their projects. For example, I like to keep my font sizes no bigger than 13, maybe 14 point. Some people have been using 18 point for the paragraph text, and if we do that, you can see that the text starts getting pretty darn large. Some people have actually used more than that. I've seen text sizes actually 24 or even 30 points, and the text just gets a little bit ridiculous here. It looks like you're zoomed way in. Another thing that people do is that they increase the line height. So they'll put the line height, this is kind of like line spacing, and I've seen a lot of people use 200% for double spacing, and as a result we get this. So this is a great way to fill up space, but it's a terrible way to design a web page. So please do not try to do this. Your font size should be no more than 14 point, and while you can do the line height more than 100%, I would recommend keeping it maybe no more maximum than 140%. So let's take a look at what that looks like. This is 140% line spacing. I'm not too crazy about it. I think that actually it might be better to have something like 130 and 13-point font size. To me, that just looks a lot better. This probably would be better. Although it changes from font to font. Different fonts have different spacing, so you've got to do what looks best for your page. But this is really, I think, a much more reasonable kind of thing. And you can see this if you go to web pages. Here's Google News. You can see their font size is much smaller than mine. Here is a blog. You can see that people are still using about 12-point font. Here's a MacRumors site. You can look at Facebook. This is a website for web designing. But you can see that they all have font sizes that are lower than what I'm using here. So actually, this is fairly large text. And you'll notice also the spacing between the lines is not that great. So once again, you don't want to get much more than this. I would say 13 point and 130% line height would probably be a comfortable maximum that you could have. You could go 14 point depending on the font. You could go 140% for the line height, but you want to make it look comfortable, easy to read. You don't want to do this just to fill up space. That's not going to gain you any points. Now, another thing that I've seen people doing is using things like the break, the BR tag, to make more space between different elements. So after the header, for example, I might want to put some more space in there. So what I see people doing is adding a couple of BRs. Whoops, excuse me, you'll notice that I made a mistake there. There we go. So I have BR, BR. So I just created a couple of line breaks in between the subtitle and the main text. And if we go and take a look at that, you can see that I just created some space there. That's a little bit too much space, but still, that's not the point. The point is that you should not be using the BR in order to create space. The way to do that instead is to increase the bottom margin of, let's say, for example, the header. So if I go to the styles, and if I say in my header, I'm going to have a bottom margin, or that would be margin bottom, of, let's say, 30 pixels. Let's see how that looks. That might be enough. If it's not, I could increase that. I could say margin bottom of 50 pixels, and now we have some more space. But that's the way to create space between elements. Don't create space by adding BR. Create space by adding margins to the top or bottom of certain elements. So that's really a much better way. You'll also notice that there is a little bit of extra space at the top. You may not want that space, so you might want to take it away. Well, how do you do that? Well, you have to remember that we've got the header here, and inside the header there's an H1 and an H2. And something that you have to always keep in mind is that the H1 tag, like many of the heading tags, has a default margin at the top and the bottom. So if you want to make that less, you would create, again, a style for the H1, and you would say margin top, and you would set it to whatever you think is reasonable. I'm going to use 10 pixels, and I'm going to see if that makes it go down or up. Let's reload, and you can see that it just went up a little bit. So apparently the top margin was something like 20 before. So I can decrease that. I can make the margin top maybe 4 pixels, and that'll bring me even closer to the top. So that's another way to control the spacing, not just to add margin, but to subtract when you have an automatic margin at the top or bottom of certain elements. So that is really the way to control spacing in and around text. And that's it for this lesson.